So we're making a video here because I kind of want to show all the tweaks and everything that I have. We're going to be showing everything. So just letting you guys know, to start with is hardware. So I'm going to explain this to you in every single way. So I have a 1400K, and the reason I have this CPU is because it is a monolithic architecture. Monolithic means that it's all one die. There is no level of separation between dies or between CPU cores or memory controllers or the interconnect to the CPU. Everything is as it should be. Monolithic CPUs are the best CPUs. Okay, it doesn't matter how fast the interconnect is. Just for the fact that you have an interconnect, it's going to be slower than a monolith. And a monolith is a monolith. It's just going to work all the time, right? It's just the best architecture. It is the fastest architecture, and it is how CPUs were originally designed. Okay, now, at my 1400K, the E-cores are off because they are terrible. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't want to touch a hybrid architecture CPU ever again in my life after dealing with this architecture. And also, the new microcodes are completely bugged, and they're terrible. So I'm using microcode 0x1004, I believe. The new microcodes are completely busted. Terrible, man. I'm using the CPU at 5.5 gigahertz. I believe the voltage is 1.35 volts. I don't remember what my SA and VDDQ voltages are, but they're separate for each CPU anyways, okay? So that's the CPU. I don't have my capture card, so I can't show you my BIOS. But essentially, every single CPU pre-cache and a bunch of other stuff in the BIOS is also turned off, okay? Now, which also in Windows, I also have... I'll get to that later, but... the CPU is at its max, pretty much. So, hyperthreading on, P-cores on, obviously, 5.5 gigahertz locked, 1.35 volts locked with a custom LLC. And if you don't know what an LLC is, it means load line calibration. I'm using an XOC motherboard as well. So, everything is nice and even and perfect, as it should be, and it's the same all the time, and it's consistent all the time. Ring is at 4.6 as well, all the time, no ring downbin. So that means the CPU is 100% consistent 100% of the time. The RAM is also tuned. I'm running 7000. Now this CPU can actually do 72, perhaps even 7400 or so on a better motherboard, but unfortunately this is a Z690 Unify, and I have one of the board batches that got a bad DIMM slot A, which means the first DIMM slot closest to the CPU is just the memory integrity isn't that good. So the CPU can do more, but it's okay because, again, with DDR5 controllers, you want to bin it down 3 from your max boot, right? Usually. So if the max your CPU can do is, let's say, 7600 in my case, you want to bring it back 3 steps, or maybe even 4, because DDR5 controllers and DDR5 in general is not like DDR4. It actually has a little bit of error correction built in, which you don't want. And I honestly hate that everything has error correction built in now. But yeah, it has error correction built in, and you're not gonna catch it. It takes 4 hours to test. So for peace of mind and just having it work, right, where you can just relax and not worry about it, you just set it back 3. Like DDR4 and before was 2. I set it 3 steps back. So I know the CPU can do easily 7200. But this board just has bad memory integrity, so I'm only doing 7000, okay? So, it's also been tested for over 48 hours in TM5 and Carhu, so it's 100% stable. It's also been tested during cold boots as well, for 15-16 hours as well on top of that, so it's stable. And then I left the computer on for months, and I came back, because I went somewhere else, and then I came back, and I tested it again, and it was still stable, so... RAM is completely stable. That's also very important to test, that everything is stable. And then as far as the motherboard configuration and the BIOS, again, I don't have my capture card, so I can't show you. Everything is off except for what I need. So like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi is off. The what do you call it? The SATA controllers are off. Like everything that I don't need is off. Also going back to the CPU, speed step. In speed step interrupt, which is not a setting that you can see. You have to edit in VRAM for that. All that shit is off. Every single boosting algorithm except the Intel. I forget what it's. You need a certain boost algorithm, even though it's not on, just to get the frequency. I forget what it's called, but everything besides that is off, okay? Again, speed step interrupt is off through NVRAM, and I'm going to show you NVRAM edits a little bit later, okay? So the CPU is 5.5 gigahertz locked, voltage is locked, and they have a custom voltage curve, I guess you could call it, with LLC. The RAM is tuned, the voltages are not auto, nothing is auto, okay? Nothing about this rig is auto. And then on top, we have a GPU overclock, which I'm going to show it there as an afterburner. And that is this. Now, I thought about power modding. It's 320, 100% core voltage, 100% power. Now, I thought about power modding this card, which I won't get into because I think I'm power limited, not voltage limited here. But yeah, that's the overclock for this card. And I'm also using a custom Windows ISO that I made using NT-Lite, which you can see here. And if you guys need or want the config, then I will give it to you. Or I can just give you my ISO. I have two of them. One has VBS on, which is virtualization-based security. That's on one of them. And on the other one, which is the one I use now because I'm only playing Warzone or just single-player games, it's off. So for the fastest latency, you don't want any virtualization. Obviously, or the virtualization stuff on the CPU and everything is turned off. Like I said, everything that I don't need is off. Now, I will get a capture card later, and I will just show you the BIOS options. I'm going to hook it up because I'm getting my AQN back in a few days. So I'm going to hook my second PC back up and then stream from that. But until that's there, I'll just, you're going to have to take my word for it. I can just dump my NVRAM, and you guys can have a look at it if you want. I can just ask like Claude or ChatGPT to look at the NVRAM and tell you everything that's on or off. But that's pretty much it for that. Now we're going to go into software. So like I said, Windows is completely stripped. Just to show you, we're going to go to Tools, Revo on Installer, okay? And then here's everything I have installed, okay? And then for Windows apps, this is all I have, okay? That's it. Now, something that's very important is also, right, I'm hoping not to forget anything, but here's my auto runs, right? And that's it. Okay, that's what I have for auto runs. And something that's even more important than auto runs is the following, which is Driver Explorer. This is how deep loaded my system is, okay? And that is, I only have two drivers, Ethernet and display. Now, I do not need chipset drivers, and you do not need chipset drivers if you are on a monolithic CPU, okay? You don't need it. This is all you need right here. Two drivers. You don't need NVMe drivers, you don't need anything. Everything's just going to work the exact same as if with drivers, okay? It does not matter. It's not that serious. And on the path of drivers, since we're already here, right? And there you go. Now, as you can see, everything is off. Everything for power management and all this stuff has already been unchecked, but I'm going to show you that later. You don't have to do that manually. I'll show you what to do later. Boom, so. And also for the GPU, where is the interrupt policy? Okay. Another tweak that I have, which actually does work pretty well, is interrupts. Now, this is why I want to buy a Bartlett Lake CPU. That's not part of my setup now, but it will be eventually. Is because 8 cores, honestly, is just not enough. The amount of interrupts that Windows has with GPUs and peripherals, like if you want to run 8K pooling or whatever, you essentially have to segment each interrupt device to each core. That's what you would want for, like, not only the fastest latency, but the most consistent latency. And 8 cores just really isn't enough to do that. Now, if you had a 12 core, which is a 12 core monolith, right? Because if you have a CCX, if you have like interconnects, the latency benefits of that are just going to go nowhere because you have to waste time going across the interconnect. The interconnect is like having AIDS, okay? Like, technically, you still function with AIDS, but you still have AIDS. It's still AIDS. It doesn't matter. Now, I have this. It's device priority is set to high and then spread across all processors. and then MSI limit is 9. This actually does do quite a bit, believe it or not. It's like you're pretty much telling it like MSI limit is essentially like an interrupt rate limit, and it's the same thing as setting interrupts for like polling rate of your mouse or your keyboard. Now, obviously, there's a lot more data going through your GPU, so the more you can interrupt it, the faster you get the data. Now, for peripherals, I'm only running 2K polling on each because most of the time your inputs are not capped by a polling rate. Now, don't get me wrong, you still notice a difference between like 2K and 8K, but most of that is trying to brute force a bad firmware or bad hardware in general. So if you have to do that, which on this keyboard I do, that just means the firmware's ass, or like the MCU's ass, or like something along the latency chain of that device just sucks cock. Okay, like that's sucks. I shouldn't talk like that but yeah, it just sucks. That's it. It just sucks. It's garbage. Firmware's garbage. MCU's garbage. Something in that latency chain of that specific device just sucks. Period. For me, the OP1AK depends for everybody knows this, but depending on your DPI is what you need to set your polling rate to. So if you're playing on low DPIs, you really don't even need more than 1K. I mean, even pros use 1K on their mice, so you really don't need more. Now, on the speaking of polling rates and interrupts, I do have this that I run sometimes, and this is pretty much turning off interrupt steering or interrupt coalescing for the USB itself. Now, unfortunately, this generation of Intel CPUs, which is the Raptor Lake, Alder Lake, everything that's not Arrow Lake, which is a new Intel architecture, you're essentially gonna have 0 direct lanes to the CPU unless you have Thunderbolt. So if you're like me and you're on Raptor Lake and you want faster and more consistent USB latency wise, right? You're gonna buy a Thunderbolt, which essentially, honestly, is what I should have done. You're gonna buy essentially like a Z690 Unify Edge or Unify X. I don't know why the big Unify doesn't have Thunderbolt. That's kind of weird when the ITX one does. But yeah, you want a Thunderbolt board. So it's just gonna be much better with Thunderbolt than it is through chipset. It's still not as good as direct, because even though you still have to go through the Thunderbolt controller, but it's still gonna be much better and more consistent because you have a lot more bandwidth, if that makes sense. And it's just you're going through the actual CPU instead of it going through Thunderbolt. So it's gonna be faster regardless, and it's gonna be probably honestly more consistent. So haven't tested it personally, right? So take my word with a grain of salt, but just on paper, it's just gonna be much better. So, but yeah, this turns off USB coalescing. Now you can use this. I don't really run it all the time because I just don't like, I don't like coming in here every reboot and doing it. I could set it to a script, but truthfully, this is like a last resort sort of thing. Like if you've done everything else, or you want to use this to test, you can use it to test. For example, I use this to test my keyboard. And I figured out that it felt a little bit better, right? Obviously, because you're not waiting for like a giant packet and sending a giant packet. You're sending all the packets at once. Is that this keyboard, by default, actually had dead zones enabled without telling you, which is why it felt like shit the entire time I've had it. It still doesn't feel that great, but, splitting hairs here. But you can use this to test your hardware. If you don't notice a difference between this on and off on an Intel system, then your problem lies elsewhere. I mean, it'll feel a little bit better, but if it doesn't feel that much better, right, you have a problem. And your problem probably is on your Hall Effect keyboards is that you probably have a Hall Effect keyboard that has dead zones by default, which makes it feel like complete garbage. So you need something like a Machos keyboard or something else that does not have included dead zones, or that you can turn them off. Yeah, so there you go. That's interrupt coalescing. That means that instead of waiting for packets, the same thing as a network adapter settings, right? Instead of waiting for like sending big packets, so you don't have to interrupt this often, this interrupts all the time. It's like using a PS2 port. It's as easy as it is to explain that, right? So that's closed. And I also run when I clean install my ISO, which is very important. I also run the FreeT scripts. Now, my Windows is already extremely debloated, and I have like enhanced point of precision and all that stuff off, and my ISO also has page file off. It has a whole bunch of stuff off. I just run those because I don't have to manually, he does like lower level tweaking to where you don't have to manually go into the device manager and uncheck power savings. You don't have to do any of that stuff, okay? It does it all for you. It strips the driver for you, so it makes sense to run it. Now, if you're wondering what this is essentially not interrupting the CPU. You're telling Windows has a check to how many times it checks how your CPU is performing. Now, for like a stock setup, that's fine, but for somebody that already has their CPU locked and has speed step and every single algorithm pretty much disabled, I don't need Windows to see how my CPU is performing. I don't need it to check for like power savings. I don't care about any of that. I want the fastest, most consistent latency. So this sets it to 5,000, I believe. And then you double click it and boom, it's there. Now, we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of this, which is, where is it? Here it is. Now this, let me go, give me a second, I have to block my screen for a second. I don't want to dox myself, so. Okay, then making sure I don't dox myself. Okay, so, like I said, everything with the CPU is disabled. Every single algorithm, every single extra feature, which is in the advanced CPU options on MSI, like CPU cache, prediction, all that garbage is off, or whatever it's called. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then on top of that, right, all this stuff is off. I mean, like I said, you can just put the NVRAM into Claude and ask what I did it in all the patches from stock, and you will see the differences regardless. The only thing that's not listed here, right? Here's all the stuff I have. The only stuff that's not listed here is the speed step interrupt, but everything else is listed, and you can see everything that I've done. Okay, so like super, they call it schizo, but it's really not schizo. So there you go. That's what I have. So I showed you what I have on my CPU. I showed you my motherboard. I told you my motherboard settings. I told you my RAM, which I can probably just show you here. We go to tools and then overclocking. Where's the Can you show you my timings here? And these are my timings for my RAM. So like I said, 7,000. And these are my timings. So now you know. Okay. I don't remember the voltages off the top of my head. Again, everything's stable, so I have no reason to touch the BIOS or even go into it anymore. Zero. I just turn on the PC and it just works all the time. Okay, and that's it. Those are my timings. So, CPU's at 5.5, 1.35 volts. Custom LLC. You saw my RAM timings. You saw my GPU overclock. You saw my interrupt settings for my GPU. You saw my my stripped windows. You saw the scripts that I use, which are free3 scripts. And then I legit think that's pretty much it. The only thing I haven't showed you yet is this, right? I don't know if it's in here or in downloads. I don't know what I have downloaded. I might have downloaded like something that's personal with my name on it, so I don't want to dox myself. But the only other thing that's missing from here is something called NVFBC, which is NVIDIA Frame Buffer Capture Relay. Now that means it's using the NVIDIA Frame Buffer Capture, and then you're essentially sending it straight to your capture card. So you don't need pass-through. I mean, pass-through is still going to be better, don't get me wrong. But you're essentially taking like maybe like a 3% performance hit compared to like 8 or 10%, right? Like using OBS on a single PC. And you're sending the frame buffer, which is extremely light. There's no processing. You're just sending it to the capture card. And then the second PC with an Intel Arc A380, which is what I have, does AV1 at like 50k bitrate with zero problems. And now that I'm using the packet priority on my NetDuma router, which I'm using, which is like something else I could tell you, I'm using my a stock AT&T fiber modem, and then I'm using DMZ to that router, to my second router, my NetDuma, which handles packet priority for my game packets, which fixes the problem when I'm streaming. So your issue in streaming is not like your network adapter settings or whatever. It's that especially with Warzone, other games seem to be fine with this, but Warzone specifically, likes having the absolute fastest packet priority and the fastest latency to you, because otherwise the game feels horrible. If you're having input lag in Warzone, if you've done all this stuff already, it's not your PC, it's not your monitor. I mean, your monitor does matter, right? But it's not your monitor, it's literally the network and their terrible servers. If the servers in Warzone were twice as fast, the game would feel way better, right? Even in the firing range, the 1% lows are affected by your network. Why they tied the engine in the network, I will never know, but it's directly tied. So the better the server is, the more stable the server is and your connection to it, the better the game's gonna feel. Like if you're playing single player games or anything else, this doesn't matter. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about is actually hardware. We already talked about the motherboard. We already talked about the GPU that we have, the RAM, and the CPU. We're about to talk about something that's more important than all those combined, and that is your cables. Do not use copper cables. You need fiber optic cables. You need AOC cables. You will not be happy with copper. Fiber is way, way, way better. It's worlds of difference in consistency, and if you want it to just work all the time, and you want peace of mind, you go buy fiber. I'm using a fiber AOC cable for my DisplayPort, and I'm using a fiber cable for my my keyboard. It feels much better with fiber than it ever did with copper. Now, I've tried using shielded cables with copper cables. For example, my DisplayPort cable that I bought was a Cable Matters HBR 80 or whatever it is, DisplayPort cable that's only like 3 feet because that's the spec. It felt like shit. I'm gonna be completely honest, it just felt like shit. I plugged in the fiber cable, it felt legit 2-3 times faster. Going from a copper cable to a fiber cable kind of feels like a monitor upgrade, going from like a 7-year-old IPS monitor that you have to like an OLED. I know that sounds insane, but I'm not joking when I say that. Going from a DisplayPort or a display cable that's copper to one that's fiber, in my experience, maybe I just have a shit ton of EMI here, which is possible too. It legit felt like going from like a shitty 10-year-old Android to going from a modern Samsung OLED panel phone. Okay, that's the easiest way that I can explain it. You're getting like a free monitor upgrade for like $50. I know that sounds crazy. I'm not joking. The consistency is just so much better. I'm just gonna be honest. It's just way better. And it just gives you peace of mind. Like I'm getting to the point where I don't want copper, like pure copper, touching my build at all. And I'm replacing every cable that I have connected to my PC with fiber. Now I'm using a OP1AK wired, so I can't replace it with a copper cable. But I will replace the OP1AK with the OP1AK wireless later down the line. And the cable that's going to be running to that OP1 wireless 8K or 4K, whatever it is, that wireless mouse dongle is going to be an AOC cable. So I will have no pure copper touching my build ever again. But until that happens, I have to use this copper cable, which does have a Ferrite choke at the end of it. So makes sense. All right. So it doesn't, I'm not completely getting rid of EMI, but close enough. I mean, I've done everything I can pretty much, right? Without spending a shit ton of money on, which I still have to buy like a metal case and stuff, but that's besides the point. So you guys see everything that I did, right? There's that with the NVRAM edits. And then on top of that, you also have the Intel interrupt steering for speed step. Okay? That's pretty much all the tweaks I've done. You can do more tweaks with Windows interrupts and where it sends the interrupts to and what core it sends them to. But like I said, I don't have enough cores for that. So if I had a Barrel like CPU, I would tell Windows to send all those interrupts from all those devices except my GPU, because again, you can control where GPU interrupts go. So essentially with 12 cores, I would have 4 cores handling interrupts for each device, and then the other 8 cores I would have for just running Windows normally or games. and I would manually use something like Process Lasso or whatever, and I would manually assign those, right? So I would have on core 0, I would have the GPU. On core 1, I would have maybe the Ethernet controller and like my mouse and my keyboard, and then every other core I would just assign for, I guess that would need 10 at that point, but I would assign to Windows. Or I could have 4 cores with interrupt steering for the GPU, right? So it spreads across those 4 cores, and the same thing, spreading those input devices and stuff through those 4 cores, or whatever you want to do, right? But you would essentially have a virgin untouched core that has no other handling. It's not doing anything else but handling those interrupts. So, or if you really wanted to, you can just leave Windows stock and then just set your GPU to the core 11, which is core 12, and then set your input devices to core 10, which is core 11. And then you don't have to mess around with it as much, and the games and everything else will still load normally. So, also the reason you want a monolithic CPU and the same type of core is because if you have a E-core CPU or hybrid architecture, which equals to me equals cancer, that means that all your interrupts are bouncing around all over the place. So you can literally have the WM going from your P-core to your E-core and making it feel like cancer as you're trying to play your game. You can only fix so much with software. Your hardware needs to be perfect, essentially. You cannot have hybrid architectures. They're going to feel like cancer. Trust me, I've tried. Nothing's going to work. Nothing is going to fix a faulty architecture. It doesn't matter. Raptor Lake's broken. And any other AMD CPU that's not an A-core X3D is a piece of garbage as well. It doesn't matter. You need a monolithic, one type of core architecture. Period. It does not matter. Like I would even take like a 16 E-core only monolith CPU over any of these terrible architectures. I don't care if there's just, oh, but it's only as fast as Raptor Lake. Doesn't matter because games now scale with core count. So even if it's the same IPC, it does not matter. It's going to still scale and get way more frame rates, and your 1% lows are going to be way better with a CPU that has 16 cores that are as fast as Raptor Lake, rather than with a CPU who's like bouncing all around the place, right? And you're having like latency variations because your clock speeds from your E-cores and your IPC from your E-cores is not the same as your P-cores. It's complete cancer, bro. Like, I don't even know why they even release this shit. Like, if I can figure this out just by wanting to put my fist through my monitor because of how inconsistent this shit is, and I hate mediocrity, I'm sure an engineer knew exactly what they were doing. How they didn't get fired for releasing this dog shit, I have no idea. But there you go. That's how you fix everything, and that's how you get everything to just be consistent all the time. Now, your 1% lows matter over everything else, which is why I want to buy a 5090 or a 6090 when it comes out, so your 1% lows can essentially be my refresh rate. But other than all that stuff that I mentioned, I'm talking about the CPU, the GPU config, the motherboard, the NVRAM tweaks, the interrupt tweaks, everything. So that's everything that I know so far. If I forget something, I'll make a new video, but that's pretty much it. Now, when I get my capture card, I'll show you my exact BIOS settings, but I'll just put my NVRAM package in the description, and I have everything, all my peripherals, my microphone, my keyboard, my mouse, etc. I'll put everything like that in the description as well. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great day. I'll have another stream when I'm playing, but yeah, I'm just ending this, so what do you call it? So it's only one video, there's nothing else to it, it's only this.